Horrifyingly, on a freezing February morning in the year 2025, in a crowded corner of a train station in Chicago, a gaunt single mother, starving and freezing along with her two 6-year-old twin daughters, was huddled against an ice-cold stone wall, a trembling, cardboard sign reading, "Single mom raising twins. Medical bills took our home. Anything helps. God bless." Thousands of people passed by every day, no one stopped, until a man who stepped down from a world of ultimate luxury, the notorious MAFIA boss Vincent Moretti, unexpectedly knelt before her. What made a ruthless man of power who had once lost everything to violence suddenly hand an unlimited black credit card to a complete stranger, and be willing to trade his entire criminal empire just to protect her and her two children? Can love bloom from the ashes of poverty and sin, or will the darkness of the past swallow everything? Join us to follow this heart-wrenching and breathtaking story. Right now, before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions, or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. Alright, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. Vincent Moretti stood at the vast floor-to-ceiling windows of his Gold Coast penthouse, gazing out over the glittering expanse of Chicago's skyline on a bitter February morning in 2025. The city below him stretched like a kingdom he had claimed through years of calculated moves. Lake Michigan's icy waves crashing against the shore in the distance, the magnificent mile alive with luxury, even in the cold. His home occupied the entire top floor of one of the most exclusive high-rises in the neighborhood, a fortress of marble floors, custom Italian leather furnishings, and art pieces worth more than most people's lifetimes. A private elevator opened directly into his foyer, guarded around the clock by discreet security. His closet held rows of tailored suits from the finest designers. His garage housed a fleet of sleek black sedans and a vintage Aston Martin he rarely drove himself. At 42, fair-skinned, with sharp features inherited from his Italian-American lineage, Vincent was the undisputed boss of Chicago's most powerful organized family, a man whose name commanded respect in boardrooms and back alleys alike. Wealth had come early and abundantly. He controlled vast interests in construction contracts across the city, legitimate on paper, but underpinned by influence that ensured his bids always won. Nightclubs on Rush Street funneled clean money through the doors, while quieter arrangements in gambling and protection kept the empire thriving. Men sought his favor. Rivals feared his disapproval. Yet every morning as he sipped espresso from a cup that cost more than a week's groceries for an average family, Vincent woke with a hollow ache that no amount of power could fill. Years ago, a rival faction had targeted him in a calculated strike. The car bomb meant for him had claimed his young wife Elena and the unborn son she carried. The loss had carved something vital out of him, leaving a void filled only with cynicism and iron control. Trust became a fool's game. His father, an old-school capo, who had risen in the shadows of the outfit's golden era, had warned him from childhood. "People are weak, Vinny. Give them an opening, and desperation turns them into animals, especially the ones with nothing. They'll smile while they take everything." Vincent had lived by that creed, building walls higher than his penthouse. Charitable donations, always through foundations filtered by lawyers for tax advantages and image. He helped no one directly. Control was everything. Emotions were liabilities. But lately the emptiness gnawed deeper. Nights blurred into chain-smoking Cuban cigars on his rooftop terrace, staring at the city lights, while remorse chewed at his soul like a persistent shadow. Guilt over Elena's death, his world had put her in danger. Remorse over choices that kept him isolated, powerful, but alone. Violent emotional storms raged inside him, one moment cold resolve, the next a consuming wave of regret that left him pacing the polished hardwood floors until dawn. He questioned it all, in silent fury. Why did power feel like drowning in luxury? Why did his father's words ring true, yet poison everything they touched? That February morning urgency pulled him from the penthouse earlier than usual. A critical meeting loomed with representatives from a rival crew encroaching on his territory in the West Loop. Tense negotiations over construction rackets that could tip into open conflict, if not handled with precision. His driver waited below, but Vincent dismissed him with a sharp gesture. "I'll take the train today. Clear my head." His men exchanged uneasy glances. The boss rarely exposed himself like that, but no one argued. As he strode through the bustling streets toward Union Station, his expensive wool overcoat cutting the wind, Vincent's mind churned. The city hummed around him, commuters rushing with coffee cups from Dunkin' yellow taxis, honking the L train rumbling overhead. But beneath the surface, he felt the undercurrents of his world, whispers of disloyalty, hints of betrayal from lesser families eyeing his dominance. Inner conflict tore at him, the need to crush threats before they grew warring, with a buried exhaustion from the endless cycle. Union Station's grand great hall swallowed him. As he entered through the Canal Street side, the historic Beaux-Arts architecture, a reminder of Chicago's storied past. Marble columns soared, soft light filtering through the massive skylight despite the gray winter sky outside. Travelers milled about, businessmen in suits, families with luggage, Amtrak announcements echoing softly. Vincent moved with purpose toward the Amtrak gates, his polished shoes clicking on the terrazzo floors, bodyguard trailing at a discreet distance. Then something stopped him cold. Near the entrance to the concourse, huddled against a cold tile wall, away from the main flow of foot traffic, sat a woman in her early 30s. Thin, far too thin, malnourished edges to her face that spoke of skipped meals stretched into months. Her coat was threadbare, patched in places, barely holding against the drafts that swept through the station's open doors. Exhaustion etched deep lines around her eyes, dark circles from countless sleepless nights. 2 little girls, identical twins, no older than 6, slept curled against her like fragile birds seeking warmth that wasn't there. One clutched a worn stuffed bear missing an eye. The other had her thumb in her mouth, tiny fingers raw from the cold. A piece of cardboard leaned beside them, scrawled in shaky marker, "Single mom of twins. Medical bills took our home. Anything helps. God bless." The woman's arms wrapped around both children protectively, a fortress of desperate maternal love. Her hair, once perhaps carefully tended, hung limp from lack of proper care. Chapped lips, ragged nails, cleaned with whatever soap she could find in public restrooms. She embodied poverty at its most raw and humiliating, exposed in a public place where thousands passed daily, reduced to pleading for spare change while fighting to keep her daughters from the full brutality of the streets. Shelters overflowed in winter. Warming centers opened only on the coldest nights. Many nights she had endured the wind, howling through underpasses or station corners, body aching from concrete floors, fear a constant companion. Vincent's heart, armored for so long, cracked without warning. Not pity, not at first. Something fiercer. An overwhelming surge that hit him like a freight train. Recognition of her quiet dignity, amid utter misery, the way she shielded those girls with everything she had left. Love, no, not yet, but the seed of it, intense and unreasonable, ignited in that instant. A passionate pull toward this stranger, who represented everything his world had taught him to distrust. Guilt crashed harder. How many times had he walked past suffering without a glance? Remorse for the life that kept him isolated. Violent conflict raged inside his father's voice, screaming warning, while a deeper buried part of him yearned to prove it wrong. He stopped walking. His bodyguard nearly bumped into him. "Boss, we're tight on time." "The meeting." "Wait here," Vincent said, voice low but firm, distant from the urgency. He approached slowly, the click of his expensive shoes echoing. The woman looked up, eyes widening in guarded fear, confusion flickering as she registered the tailored coat, the aura of power. No rehearsed plea escaped her lips. Just bone-deep weariness and instinctive protectiveness as she tightened her hold on the sleeping twins. Vincent knelt, ignoring the chill seeping through his trousers. Up close, her poverty struck harder, the faint tremor in her hands from cold and hunger, the way she sat to hide holes in her shoes. Humiliating, unfair, the system that let a mother and her children fall this far while men like him amassed fortunes. His inner turmoil intensified to a storm. Gnawing guilt over his own losses twisted with sudden consuming remorse for the indifference he'd cultivated. Why her? Why now? The emotional conflict felt violent, tearing at his carefully built walls. Yet in that moment, staring into her exhausted but unbroken eyes, Vincent felt the first real spark of something human in years, an intense, passionate protectiveness that bordered on love from the very first glance. He didn't know her name yet, but in his heart everything had already begun to change. The February wind howled through the open doors of Union Station like a living thing, sharp and merciless, slicing straight through the thin layers Kayla Thompson had wrapped around herself and her twin daughters. She sat with her back pressed against the cold tile wall near the Amtrak gates, knees drawn up, arms locked around Harper and Riley as they slept fitfully against her sides. 6 years old, both of them small for their age because meals had been scarce for far too long. Their cheeks were pale lashes, dark against skin that had not seen proper warmth in weeks. Kayla's own body ached in every joint from nights spent on concrete, from carrying the girls when shelters turned them away, for lack of space, from hunger that gnawed constantly, but was always pushed aside so the twins could eat whatever little she managed to find. Her coat, Once a decent winter jacket bought secondhand years ago, was now threadbare at the elbows, zipper broken stuffing, poking out like desperate feathers trying to escape. Beneath it, she wore 2 sweaters layered over a long-sleeved shirt, all of them washed in public restroom sinks with hand soap when she could. Her jeans were patched with duct tape on the inside to hide the holes. Socks, mismatched and thin, did little against the chill that seeped up from the floor. Sleep had become a luxury she stole in snatches, always one eye half open, always listening for security guards who might tell them to move along, always guarding her daughters from the world that had already taken so much. The cardboard sign beside her leaned crookedly, the marker letters smudged from yesterday's light snow. Single mom of twins. Medical bills took our home. Anything helps. God bless. Passers-by streamed past in waves, commuters in warm coats, travelers with rolling suitcases, families heading home for the weekend. Most never looked down. A few dropped coins or a dollar bill into the empty coffee cup in front of her, murmuring God bless without stopping. Others averted their eyes as though poverty might be contagious. Each indifference carved another small wound into her heart, but Kayla kept her face calm, her posture straight, despite the exhaustion that made her bones feel like glass. She would not let her girls wake to a mother who had given up. Inside, the torment was constant. Quiet moments of condensed stillness stretched endlessly as she stared at the polished floor and wondered how life had become this unfair. Her husband gone 6 years now to cancer that ate through their savings faster than insurance could cover. The apartment lost to foreclosure. Jobs that paid too little and required childcare she could not afford. One unreasonable blow after another until the streets became the only option. Nights when the temperature dropped below freezing and no warming center had room. Mornings when she woke numb, unsure if her fingers would ever feel warm again. The humiliation of begging in a place where thousands walked past every hour reduced to a spectacle of misery. Tears came sometimes silent and hot, but she wiped them away before the twins could see. That morning the cold felt sharper than usual. Harper stirred, whimpering in her sleep, and Kayla pulled her closer, whispering soft reassurances into tangled hair. Riley clutched the one-eyed stuffed bear they shared thumb and mouth. Kayla's own stomach twisted with hunger. She had given the last granola bar to the girls the night before. Her head throbbed from dehydration and lack of sleep, vision occasionally blurring at the edges. Yet she sat watchful, protective, refusing to let despair win completely. Then the crowd parted slightly and a man stopped. Vincent Moretti had been moving with the purposeful stride of someone who owned every inch of ground he walked on. His charcoal wool overcoat, custom-made cashmere-lined, fell perfectly over a tailored suit that cost more than most people earned in months. Polished leather shoes reflected the station lights. A Patek Philippe watch glinted at his wrist, understated but unmistakable to those who knew. He carried no briefcase today. His hands were free, one sliding into his pocket as he walked. Behind him at a respectful distance, his bodyguard scanned the crowd out of habit. Vincent had almost passed the corner where Kayla sat, when some invisible thread yanked his attention downward. His steps slowed, then halted entirely. The bodyguard nearly collided with him. "Boss." The word was low, cautious. Vincent did not answer. His gaze locked on the woman, and the 2 small girls curled against her. Something fierce and immediate surged through him, passionate and overwhelming like a flame catching dry tinder. It was not mere sympathy. It was recognition of resilience in the face of utter devastation, of love that refused to break. In that single frozen moment, an intense burning love ignited in his chest for this complete stranger, irrational and undeniable. His heart tore violently between decades of cynicism and this sudden consuming need to protect her, to shield her from every cold wind that had ever touched her skin. Guilt crashed harder than it had in years. Remorse for the life he led, for the dangers that had taken Elena and their child, for the indifference he had cultivated as armor. Violent emotional conflict raged his father's warnings, screaming that desperation bred betrayal while every instinct roared to prove them wrong. He felt dizzy with the force of it, numb and yet painfully alive. The disparity struck him like a physical blow, his penthouse warmth against her exposure to this merciless cold, his endless resources against her empty coffee cup. He approached slowly, shoes clicking on the terrazzo floor. Kayla felt the shift before she saw him, the way the crowd seemed to part further, the sudden quiet in her immediate space. She looked up and her breath caught. The man kneeling before her was unlike anyone who had ever stopped. Power radiated from him in waves, the cut of his coat, the watch, the way he held himself. Fair-skinned, sharp-featured dark hair lightly touched with silver at the temples. Eyes that had seen too much yet now looked at her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. Fear flickered first. Men like this did not stop for women like her without wanting something. Confusion followed, then guarded curiosity. Her arms tightened instinctively around the twins. Vincent's voice when he spoke was low and steady, but inside he was unraveling. "What's your name?" Kayla's throat tightened. Her voice came out soft, timid, polite, the tone of someone long accustomed to being powerless in the presence of authority. Kayla Thompson. She hesitated, then added, "And these are my daughters, Harper and Riley." He nodded slowly, gaze moving over the girls with something achingly tender that she could not yet name. The love in his chest burned hotter, fierce, and protective. Inner torment tore at him. How many nights had she sat like this while he slept in silk sheets? How many meals had she skipped while his refrigerator held food he barely touched? "How long have you been here?" he asked quietly. Shame flooded her, hot and humiliating. Tears pricked, but she blinked them back. "A few months," she whispered. "Shelters are full most nights. We manage." Vincent's jaw tightened imperceptibly. A few months. 2 little girls sleeping on station floors while the city glittered around them. The injustice of it clawed at him. His heart tore wider, gnawing remorse for every time he had walked past suffering, consuming guilt for the empire built on control rather than compassion. Outside in the distance, tires screeched faintly. His bodyguard's phone buzzed an alert about rival movement nearby. Vincent ignored it, but tension rippled through him. The meeting he was headed to involved the very crew now probing his territory. Street confrontations had escalated in recent weeks. Bold drive-bys, unexpected standoffs in alleys, messages sent through intimidation rather than words. He knew they watched his movements. Stopping here, exposing vulnerability, was dangerous. Yet he could not walk away. Kayla watched his face, confusion deepening. Why was he still here? Men in expensive coats did not kneel on dirty floors for women like her. Fear edged in again. What did he want? Her body trembled slightly from cold and anxiety, dizziness threatening at the edges of her vision. Vincent saw the tremor, and something inside him shattered further. The passionate love that had sparked now blazed intense and all-consuming. He wanted to wrap her in warmth, to erase every unfair night she had endured. The inner conflict felt violent, tearing him between caution and this overwhelming surge. In that quiet, condensed moment of stillness, trains rumbling overhead, crowds flowing past, wind whistling through open doors, 2 worlds collided. One of unimaginable wealth and power, haunted by loss and remorse. One of absolute destitution and resilient love, battered by endless injustice. And in the space between them, something irreversible began. The quiet in Union Station's Great Hall felt suddenly thicker, as though the rushing crowds, the distant train announcements, and even the wind howling through the doors had paused to watch what would happen next. Kayla Thompson sat frozen against the cold tile wall, her thin arms still wrapped around Harper and Riley, who slept on unaware. Her heart pounded so hard she feared it might wake them. The man kneeling before her, Vincent Moretti, was unlike anyone she had ever encountered. Power clothed him as completely as his expensive overcoat, yet his eyes held something raw, something that made her dizzy with confusion and fear. Vincent's voice remained low, steady, but inside him a storm raged with increasing violence. The passionate love that had ignited the moment he saw her now burned hotter, an intense, overwhelming surge that tore at every defense he had built over decades. Guilt gnawed deeper for the isolation he had chosen, for the dangers his world created, for every night this woman and her daughters had suffered while he slept in luxury. Remorse flooded him in waves, consuming and relentless. His father's warnings echoed like thunder. Desperation makes thieves of everyone. Yet the sight of Kayla's quiet dignity amid utter humiliation silenced that voice more effectively than any argument ever could. Inner conflict felt like blades twisting in his chest, caution screaming to walk away, while love, fierce and irrational, demanded he stay. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and withdrew a sleek black credit card, American Express Centurion, titanium edges, no preset spending limit. To most people it was legend. To Vincent it was simply one of several he carried. He held it between gloved fingers, the metal catching the station's soft light. Kayla's eyes widened. Confusion sharpened into suspicion. Her body tensed, a protective instinct flaring even through exhaustion. Men did not hand priceless things to women like her. There was always a price, always a catch. Horror flickered at the edges of her mind. What kind of cruel joke was this? Her voice emerged, soft, timid, trembling with polite fear. "Sir, I don't understand." Vincent's throat tightened. Hearing her call him sir, so respectful despite her circumstances, deepened the tear in his heart. "It's yours," he said quietly. "For 24 hours. No limit, no conditions. Buy whatever you and your daughters need. Food, clothes, a hotel room, anything." Kayla stared at the card as though it might burn her. Shock crashed over her in numbing waves. Dizziness swept through her malnourished body. The station seemed to tilt slightly, colors blurring at the edges. She had not eaten properly in days, had not slept in a real bed in months. The idea that this card could change that, even for one day, was so absurdly unfair in its generosity that pain lanced through her chest. Tears threatened, hot and sudden. Why would a stranger offer this? What did he truly want? Fear coiled tighter. She pulled the twins closer as if the card itself might somehow endanger them. I can't, she whispered, voice breaking. This has to be some kind of mistake. Or a trick. People don't just... She trailed off, shame flooding her cheeks with color for the first time in weeks. Vincent leaned forward, slightly careful not to crowd her. The love in his chest blazed now, passionate and protective, a burning need to shield her from every injustice she had endured. Inner torment escalated, gnawing remorse for the life that had taught him never to trust violent conflict between cynicism and this overwhelming desire to prove his father wrong. It's not a trick, he said, voice steady despite the chaos inside. I want to know what someone who has nothing does when suddenly given everything. Call it a test of human nature, of goodness. He pressed the card gently into her palm. Her fingers were ice cold, rough from exposure, trembling uncontrollably. The contact, brief, accidental, sent a jolt through him, intensifying the fierce surge of love. He wanted to warm those hands to erase every cold night. Guilt clawed deeper. How many times had he passed people like her without a second glance? Kayla closed her fingers around the card slowly, as though expecting it to vanish. The plastic felt foreign, impossibly smooth against her chapped skin. Disorientation spun through her, shock so profound her breath came shallow. This could not be real. Men in cashmere coats did not kneel on dirty station floors and hand unlimited wealth to homeless mothers. Yet the card was solid, heavy with promise. Anxiety surged, mingling with a tiny, treacherous spark of hope she immediately tried to smother. Hope was dangerous. It hurt worse when crushed. 24 hours, Vincent repeated, standing slowly. His knees protested the cold tile, but he ignored it. No pin, just sign your name. I'll find you here tomorrow morning. Same place. His bodyguard shifted impatiently behind him, murmuring, Boss, we're late. The West Loop crew, Vincent raised one hand without looking back, silencing the man. Outside through the great glass doors, he caught movement, 2 dark SUVs slowing at the curb across Canal Street. Rival colors. His jaw tightened. The opposing faction had been testing boundaries for weeks. Unexpected drive-bys that stopped short of shots fired. Bold stares in neutral territory, whispered challenges delivered through intermediaries. They sensed any weakness. Showing vulnerability here now was reckless. Yet walking away from Kayla felt impossible. Kayla watched him with guarded curiosity warring against fear. The way he commanded silence from the man behind him, the subtle tension in his posture, she sensed power deeper than wealth. Confusion deepened the dizziness. The world felt suddenly unreal. Her soft voice emerged again, barely audible. Why me? Vincent looked down at the twins, Harper stirring slightly, Riley still clutching the worn bear, and then back to Kayla. The love in his heart burned brighter, fierce and consuming. Because you're protecting them with everything you have left, he said quietly. And I'm tired of believing the worst in people who've already lost everything. He turned to leave, each step tearing at him. The passionate surge threatened to pull him back, to gather her and the girls into his armored car and take them somewhere warm right then. But the test mattered. He needed to see, to know if goodness could survive absolute desperation. His father's voice whispered warnings, she'll drain it all and disappear. Yet another voice, fragile but growing stronger, whispered something different. What if she proves you wrong? Kayla sat motionless long after he walked away. The black card clutched in her fist like a lifeline thrown into raging water. Tears finally spilled silent down her thin cheeks. The unfairness of the moment of holding potential salvation, while still sitting on cold tile with her starving children, was almost too much to bear. Suspicion lingered sharp and protective, yet beneath it a tiny flame of possibility flickered, warming places that had been frozen for months. Outside, Vincent stepped into the February wind. The 2 SUVs idled across the street, windows, tinted engines running. His bodyguard moved closer. One vehicle pulled forward slowly, driver staring openly, a bold, unexpected provocation on a busy downtown street. Vincent met the gaze without flinching, hand sliding inside his coat in silent warning. The SUV accelerated away at the last moment, tires squealing on slushy pavement. Message received, challenge noted. His driver waited curbside in the black Escalade. Vincent slid into the heated leather back seat, the door closing with a solid thunk that sealed out the cold. Warmth enveloped him instantly, seat heaters, climate control set perfectly. The contrast to Kayla's exposure struck like a physical blow. Remorse consumed him anew. Violent emotional conflict tore wider the need to maintain control in his dangerous world, warring with the burning, passionate love that now demanded he upend everything for a woman he had met minutes ago. He pulled out his phone, opened the banking app, and linked the card to real-time notifications. Every transaction would appear instantly. He stared at the screen, heart pounding with anticipation and dread. Back in the station, Kayla remained against the wall, card hidden deep in her pocket. The twins slept on. Wind continued to whistle through open doors. The coffee cup beside her held $3.72 in change. And in the quiet, condensed stillness between impossible wealth and absolute poverty, the test began. Vincent Moretti did not go to the meeting. Instead, he sat in the back of the Escalade as it idled curbside outside Union Station, engine rumbling, low heater blasting against the February chill. His driver glanced in the rearview mirror once, then kept silent. The bodyguard stood outside the open door, scanning Canal Street with the practiced boredom of a man who had seen too many standoffs begin with nothing more than a wrong look. Vincent ignored them both. He stared at his phone thumb hovering over the banking app, as though willing the screen to change. It did not. 20 minutes passed. 30. The black credit card Kayla Thompson now held was linked to his personal Centurion account. Every swipe, every tap, every authorization would ping here in real time. He had set alerts for every dollar, every cent. He wanted to see everything. Needed to. The test had begun the moment her cold fingers closed around the plastic, and already the waiting was tearing him apart. Inside his chest, love burned with a ferocity that bordered on violence. It had ignited the instant he saw her thin, exhausted, shielding two small girls from a world that had already taken too much, and now it raged hot and consuming. He loved her already, though he did not know her middle name. Loved her for the way she had not begged. Loved her for the quiet dignity etched into every line of her face. Loved her for the way she had pulled her daughters closer when fear flashed through her eyes, as though her body might become a shield against whatever came next. But love for Vincent Moretti was never simple. Guilt gnawed at him with increasing ferocity, gnawing remorse for the life that had made him this man, for the empire built on shadows and silence, for the wife and child lost to a rival's bomb meant for him. Every night for 6 years he had replayed that morning, the explosion, the silence that followed. Every night he had told himself it was the cost of power, the price of survival. Now watching Kayla's empty coffee cup in his mind's eye, the lie cracked wide open. Power had not kept his family safe. It had destroyed them. And now here was this woman, this stranger, suffering in ways he could not comprehend, while he lived in a penthouse with views that stretched to the horizon, while his closets overflowed with coats he never wore, while his refrigerator held food he barely touched. He wanted to tear the city apart with his bare hands. Wanted to find every shelter that had turned her away, every landlord who had evicted her, every system that had failed her, and make them pay. Violent emotional conflict raged, his father's voice screaming that trust was weakness. That desperation bred betrayal, while his heart roared that this woman, this mother, was proof that goodness could survive even the coldest nights. The phone buzzed. Vincent's breath caught. He unlocked the screen with trembling fingers. Transaction $37.84. Location: Walgreens, State Street. His pulse spiked. He clicked for details, but the app only showed the amount, not the items. $37. Not a splurge, not a spree, a necessity. Something small, practical. For the girls, for her. He leaned back against the leather seat, staring at the ceiling, trying to picture it. Kayla walking into a brightly lit drugstore, fluorescent lights harsh against her tired eyes, selecting things from shelves she could not afford. Would she buy medicine, food, warm socks? The thought of her choosing carefully, counting every penny, even with unlimited funds, twisted something deep inside him. Another buzz. Transaction $52.19. Location: Target South Bay. His chest tightened. Not extravagant, not wasteful. These were the purchases of someone who knew the value of every dollar. Someone who had learned to stretch nothing into something. He could imagine her thin, malnourished, sleep-deprived, pushing a cart through aisles of abundance, overwhelmed by the sheer possibility of it all. Would she touch the coats, the boots, the blankets? Would her hands shake as she realized she could take whatever she needed? The love in his heart surged, passionate and fierce, a burning need to be there to see her face when she understood she was no longer powerless. A third notification. Transaction $2,863. Location: Dunkin' Donuts, Downtown Crossing. Vincent's breath hitched. That was significant. Not for him, $2,000 was nothing, but for her. For someone who had begged for change an hour ago. He stared at the screen, heart pounding. What could she have bought? Donuts? That didn't make sense. Coffee. A gift card. Something for the girls. Confusion mingled with the love, creating a storm of emotions he could not name. Inner torment escalated. Gnawing remorse. For every time he had dismissed the suffering around him. Violent conflict between the man he had been and the one he wanted to become. He could not wait. Drive, he told his driver sharply. Back Bay Station. Now. The Escalade pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic. Vincent leaned forward, watching the city blur past. His mind raced. What if she was planning something bigger? What if she was waiting for stores to open? preparing to max out the card on luxuries she had never known. The thought sickened him, not because he cared about the money, but because it would mean his father's words were right. Desperation would win, goodness would lose. But another part of him, quieter but growing louder, whispered something different. What if she didn't? What if she bought only what she needed? What if she proved him wrong? The SUV slowed at a red light near Millennium Park. Outside, a group of rival crew members lounged against a parked car, eyes narrowing as they recognized the Escalade. One of them, young, cocky, wearing a jacket with the wrong colors, stepped forward, blocking the intersection. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. Vincent met the man's gaze through the tinted window, expression cold. A tense moment stretched, bold, unexpected, the kind of street confrontation that could escalate in seconds. The rival smirked, then backed off at the last second, raising his hands in mock surrender as the light turned green. Vincent exhaled slowly. The world was watching, always watching. One wrong move and everything could unravel. Yet here he was, abandoning a critical meeting to chase a woman he had met once. A test he had set on impulse, a love that had ignited like wildfire and now threatened to consume him. His phone buzzed again. Transaction $100. Location, Children's Place. Vincent's heart stuttered. Children's clothes. For Harper and Riley. Not for her, not for herself. For the girls. He closed his eyes, leaning back against the seat, a sound escaping his throat that was half sob, half laugh. Relief flooded him, followed by a wave of something deeper. Gratitude, awe, love. So intense it felt like pain. She was choosing them first. Always them first. Even now, when she held unlimited wealth in her hand, her first thought was for her daughters. The Escalade pulled up outside Back Bay Station. Vincent stepped out into the cold coat, flapping in the wind. The bodyguard followed at a distance. Inside, the station buzzed with evening commuters. Vincent moved quickly, scanning the familiar corner near the Amtrak gates. She was still there. Kayla sat with her back against the wall, the twins now awake and huddled close. Harper clutched a small paper bag, new clothes, Vincent realized. Riley held a stuffed animal, something soft and purple with a tag still dangling. Kayla looked up as he approached, eyes widening in shock. Confusion, fear, curiosity, all flickered across her face in rapid succession. Her voice was soft, timid, polite. "You're back." Vincent knelt again, ignoring the cold tile. "I couldn't wait." He nodded toward the girls. "They look warm." Tears welled in Kayla's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. The card was still in her hand, clutched tightly. Vincent reached out gently, closing her fingers around it again. "Keep it. You have hours left." "But," she started, then stopped, overwhelmed. Dizziness swept over her, the world tilting slightly. The absurdity of it all, sitting on cold tile while holding a card that could buy a house, while this powerful man knelt before her like she was something precious. Numbness spread through her chest, followed by a sharp, violent ache. Hope was dangerous. Hope hurt. But it was there, flickering, impossible to ignore. Vincent stood, his own heart tearing wider. The love in his chest burned brighter, fiercer, more consuming than ever. He wanted to take her away right then, to shield her from every unfair moment, every cold night, every unreasonable injustice. But the test wasn't over. He needed to see what she would do next. Outside, tires screeched again. The rival SUV from earlier idled across the street, watching. Vincent met their gaze through the window, unblinking. Message received. Challenge noted. But inside the station, in that quiet, condensed moment of stillness, Vincent Moretti knew something had already changed forever. The waiting was over. The truth was beginning to emerge, and it was breaking his heart wide open. Vincent Moretti pushed through the doors of Back Bay Station, with the force of a man who could no longer contain the storm inside him. The February wind whipped at his coat, but he barely felt it. His eyes scanned the familiar corner near the Amtrak gates, and there she was, Kayla Thompson, still seated against the cold tile wall, but transformed in small, heartbreaking ways. The twins were awake now. Harper and Riley sat close to their mother, wearing brand-new puffy winter coats in bright purple hoods trimmed with soft faux fur. Matching waterproof boots covered their feet, and fresh Cubs beanies pulled low over their ears. Riley hugged a new stuffed bear plush clean with a ribbon still tied around its neck, while Harper carefully colored in a fresh book with a pack of Crayola crayons that smelled like childhood promise. Their cheeks held a faint flush of warmth for the first time in months. They looked like children again, not small survivors of an endless winter. Kayla saw him approaching, and rose immediately, movements careful but unsteady. The black card was already extended in her trembling hand, as though she had been waiting to return it the moment he appeared. Her voice came soft, timid, edged with panic. "I was going to give it back, I promise. I only used it for a few things. Necessary things. Vincent stopped a few feet away, raising both hands gently. "Keep it," he said, voice low and thick. "You still have hours left." Relief and confusion warred across her thin face. She sank back down, slowly body folding, as though the strength that had kept her upright suddenly drained away. The girls looked up at him with wide, curious brown eyes, shy but no longer frightened. Vincent knelt once more, ignoring the protest of his expensive trousers against the filthy floor. The love in his chest had become a living flame, passionate, intense, burning so fiercely it threatened to consume him whole. Seeing the twins warm, seeing color in their cheeks because of choices she had made with his money, tore his heart wider than any rival's threat ever could. He glanced at Riley's bear. "That's a fine friend you've got there." "What's her name?" Riley hugged, the toy tighter, a small smile breaking through. "Bella," she whispered. Vincent's throat closed. The simplicity of it, a child naming a stuffed animal, something so ordinary, something Kayla had been unable to give them until today. Gnawing remorse flooded him anew. How many small joys had been stolen from them while he lived in excess? Violent emotional conflict raged, the man who ruled Chicago's shadows screaming that this was weakness, that attachment was danger, while the man he was becoming ached to protect this fragile new world, with every resource he possessed. "What else did you buy?" he asked Kayla quietly. She hesitated, shame flickering across her features, then reached into her worn coat pocket and pulled out 2 crumpled receipts. She handed them over like evidence she expected to be judged for. Vincent took them carefully, smoothing the thermal paper against his knee. The first receipt broke something inside him. Children's winter coats size 6. Children's waterproof boots 2 pairs. Socks thick wool blend 3 packs. Children's underwear pack of 7. Stuffed bear toy. Coloring books 3 pack. Crayola crayons 24 count. Children's multivitamins. Band-Aids character-themed. Neosporin ointment. Children's cold medicine. Every single item for Harper and Riley. Not one thing for herself. Not a coat to replace her threadbare one. Not gloves for her chapped hands. Not even a cup of coffee to warm her from the inside. Vincent's vision blurred. He turned to the second receipt, breath-catching. Bread, whole wheat. Peanut butter creamy. Granola bars variety pack. Apples, bag of 6. Juice boxes, apple 10 count. Crackers, cheddar cheese. String cheese 12 pack. Gallon of milk 2%. And at the very bottom printed in bold, Women's Shelter Donation Fund $100. He looked up sharply. "You donated money?" Kayla's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, the first real color he had seen in her face. Her voice was barely audible. "The shelter on Mass Avenue. They helped us when they had room. They're always short on supplies. I thought, if I had a little extra, even just for one day, maybe I could give something back." Vincent stared at her, the receipts trembling slightly in his hand. The woman who had slept on subway floors for months, who had gone hungry so her daughters could eat, who had endured cold that seeped into bones, who had been given unlimited wealth for 24 hours and chosen to spend it on necessities for her children and charity for strangers. His father's voice, the one that had shaped him for 42 years, went silent, obliterated by truth printed on cheap thermal paper. This woman who had every reason to be selfish, who had every justification to think only of survival, had chosen love, had chosen kindness, had chosen to give when she herself had nothing. "You didn't buy anything for yourself," he said, voice strained to breaking. "Not one thing." Kayla shook her head, eyes dropping to her patched shoes. "The girls come first. They always come first. I can manage. I've managed this long." Vincent looked at Harper and Riley coloring together, now heads bent close, Bella the bear supervising from Riley's lap. Children who had learned too young that the world was unstable and cold, yet who still smiled, still colored butterflies with fierce concentration. A fierce, protective love surged through him, not just for Kayla, but for these 2 small girls, who had become part of the fire burning in his chest. For the first time in decades, Vincent Moretti felt small. Not in power, not in wealth, but in character. In basic human decency. This destitute single mother, thin and malnourished and sleep-deprived, had more grace in her roughened hands than he had cultivated in a lifetime of privilege. Outside the station, tires screeched. Vincent's head snapped up. Through the glass doors, he saw 2 dark sedans pull up aggressively at the curb, rival colors unmistakable. Doors opened. 4 men stepped out, postures, bold eyes locked on his Escalade parked nearby. One made a slow, deliberate gesture, slashing across his throat. "Message clear. We see you. We know you're distracted." Vincent's bodyguard moved instantly, hand inside his coat. Vincent raised one finger, wait. The rivals held position for a long, tense moment, the busy street flowing around them like water around rocks. Then at some unseen signal, they climbed back into their cars and pulled away, tires spinning on slush. Challenge delivered. War postponed but not cancelled. Vincent turned back to Kayla. She had seen none of it, eyes fixed on her daughters. The contrast struck him like a blow, his world of calculated threats and power plays, her world of quiet survival and selfless love. The injustice of it, of her sitting on cold tile while danger circled him because he had dared to stop and help tore at him violently. "Come with me," he said, suddenly, the words escaping before caution could stop them. Kayla blinked, confusion deepening. "What, both of you? All three of you? Come with me." His voice cracked slightly. Somewhere warm, somewhere safe. Fear flickered in her eyes, fear of the unknown, fear that this was still some elaborate cruelty. Yet beneath it something else stirred. A tiny, treacherous hope she had not allowed herself in years. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and sudden. She looked at her daughters, then back at the man kneeling before her, the powerful stranger whose eyes held an intensity she could not name. For the first time in months, Kayla Thompson let herself wonder if the world might not be entirely cruel after all. And Vincent Moretti, watching her tears fall, felt his carefully armored heart shatter completely. The test he had designed for her had revealed not her character but his own. And in that revelation, in the quiet, condensed stillness of a busy station corner, everything changed. Vincent Moretti felt the world narrow to the small circle of tile, where Kayla Thompson sat with her daughters. The station's noise train announcements, rolling suitcases hurried, footsteps faded into a distant hum. All that existed was the woman before him, thin and trembling, clutching receipts that had just rewritten everything he thought he knew about human nature. The donation to the shelter, $100 given away when she herself had nothing hung between them like a quiet thunderclap. Kayla had been homeless for months, sleeping on frozen floors, skipping meals so Harper and Riley could eat enduring wind that cut through threadbare clothes like knives. She had every reason to hoard, to indulge, to finally take something for herself after years of loss. Instead, she had chosen to help strangers who might be suffering even more. Vincent's carefully constructed worldview, the one built on his father's bitter lessons, hardened by the loss of his wife and unborn child, collapsed in that instant. The silence in his mind where those old warnings had lived was deafening. Goodness had not been crushed by desperation. It had survived. It had thrived quiet and fierce in the heart of this exhausted mother. His throat burned. Tears, unfamiliar, unwelcome, pricked at the corners of his eyes. He, Vincent Moretti, the man who commanded fear and respect across Chicago, felt his heart tear open with a violence that left him breathless. The love that had sparked the moment he first saw her now roared into a blaze, passionate and all-consuming. He loved her for her resilience, for her selflessness, for the way she had protected her daughters with a love that refused to dim, no matter how dark the nights became. He loved her with an intensity that terrified him because love in his world had always meant loss. Gnawing remorse flooded him in waves more powerful than any rival's threat. Remorse for the years spent believing the worst of people. For the indifference that had let him walk past suffering thousands of times. For the empire he had built on control and isolation, while women like Kayla fought alone against a system that crushed them without mercy. Violent emotional conflict tore at him, the old Vincent screaming that this was suicide, that attachment would destroy him as it had before. The new Vincent, raw and bleeding, desperate to prove that redemption was possible. Kayla watched him with wide, confused eyes. She had expected judgment, perhaps anger. Instead, the powerful man kneeling before her looked broken. Her own heart twisted in response. Shock rippled through her malnourished body, dizziness sweeping in so strongly she swayed slightly, one hand pressing against the cold tile for balance. The absurdity of the moment crushed her, sitting in her patched coat, surrounded by the pitiful remains of her life in a single plastic bag. While this stranger who could buy entire buildings without blinking looked at her as though she had just handed him salvation. "Why are you crying?" she whispered, voice soft and timid, barely audible over the station noise. Vincent hadn't realized the tears had escaped. He wiped them away, roughly embarrassed, and yet unable to stop them. "Because you're extraordinary," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Because you had every reason to take everything and instead you gave. Because my father was wrong. About everything." Kayla's breath caught. Fresh tears spilled down her own cheeks, tears she had not allowed herself in months, because crying took energy she needed for survival. The unfairness of it all crashed over her. The medical bills that had stolen her husband, and then her home. The shelters that turned them away on the coldest nights. The thousands of people who walked past every day without seeing her, daughter's cold fingers or her own empty stomach. And now this impossible kindness, from a man whose world was so far removed from hers, that it felt like a dream she might wake from back on frozen concrete. "I just did what any mother would," she said quietly, looking at Harper and Riley. The girls had paused their coloring, watching the adults with solemn curiosity. "They deserve better than this." Vincent's heart tore wider. "You all deserve better than this. Outside, the tension escalated without warning. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb, blocking Vincent's Escalade. 4 men emerged, rival crew, the same ones who had been testing boundaries all week. The leader, a thick-necked man Vincent recognized from past negotiations, strode toward the station doors with deliberate boldness. His men fanned out hands in coat pockets, eyes scanning for weakness. Vincent's bodyguard moved instantly, positioning himself between the entrance and Vincent's position. Vincent stood slowly, placing himself protectively in front of Kayla and the twins. The love burning in his chest sharpened into something fierce and dangerous. No one would touch them, not while he breathed. The rival leader paused just inside the doors, 20 feet away. Their eyes locked across the busy concourse. A tense, silent confrontation stretched bold and unexpected in such a public place. Commuters flowed around them unknowingly. The rival smirked, making a slow gesture, pointing 2 fingers at his own eyes, then at Vincent. "We're watching you." Vincent's response was immediate and cold. A single, subtle nod toward his bodyguard, who shifted just enough to reveal the outline beneath his coat. Message returned, "Try it and see what happens." The rival held the stare for another long moment, then turned and walked out. The SUV peeled away with screaming tires. Vincent exhaled slowly, adrenaline surging through him. The danger was real and growing his rivals, sensing blood in the water, smelling vulnerability in his distraction. But turning back now was impossible. The emotional turning point had come irreversible and complete. He looked down at Kayla. She had seen some of it, the sudden tension, the way he had positioned himself like a shield. Fear flickered in her eyes, mingling with the confusion and exhaustion. "Who are you?" she whispered. Vincent knelt again, closer this time. The passionate love in his chest threatened to spill over into words he wasn't ready to say. "Someone who just realized he's been wrong about everything that matters," he said quietly. "Someone who wants to make it right. Starting with you and your daughters." Kayla's world spun. Dizziness intensified. Numbness spread through her limbs. The man before her, wealthy, beyond comprehension, powerful enough that men backed down from him with just a look, was offering help. Real help. Not charity, filtered through bureaucracy, but direct, immediate safety. The psychological shock was overwhelming. Someone who had been invisible for months, reduced to begging in public places, suddenly seen, protected, valued. Pain lanced through her chest, sharp, violent, the accumulated grief of every unfair night crashing against this impossible hope. She pressed a hand to her heart, afraid it might stop beating from the sheer force of the emotion. Harper tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, are we going somewhere warm?" The innocent question broke something in both adults. Kayla's tears fell faster. Vincent's jaw clenched against his own. "Yes, sweetheart," he answered, for her voice thick. "Somewhere very warm. With real beds, and hot food, and no more cold floors." He extended his hand, not demanding, simply offering. Kayla stared at it, strong, well-manicured, warm from leather gloves, so different from her own chapped, trembling fingers. The disparity between their worlds had never been clearer. Yet in his eyes she saw no pity, only respect. And something deeper, something that made her heart stutter with feelings she had no name for. After a long moment of quiet, condensed stillness amid the bustling station, amid the threats circling outside, she placed her hand in his. The contact sent fire through Vincent's veins. The love that had been building since the first moment he saw her now consumed him entirely. He would burn his old world to the ground if that's what it took to keep her safe. As he helped her stand gathering their few belongings with gentle care, Vincent Moretti crossed a line he could never uncross. The cynical king of Chicago's shadows had found something worth more than power. And in the depths of his torn open heart, redemption began to take root. Vincent Moretti guided Kayla and the twins out of Back Bay Station, with a gentleness that belied the storm still raging in his chest. His hand hovered at her elbow, not quite touching, ready to steady her if the dizziness returned. Kayla walked in a haze, one small hand gripping Harper's, the other, Riley's, their new boots, squeaking softly on the polished floor. The plastic bag containing everything they owned swung lightly from her wrist, the sum of their previous life reduced to a few worn clothes and a toothbrush shared between 3. Outside, the February wind hit them like a slap. Kayla instinctively hunched, pulling the girls closer, but the new coats held firm. Vincent felt the contrast like a knife, his cashmere overcoat barely registering the cold, while even now, in fresh winter gear, Kayla's thin frame trembled from months of exposure etched into her bones. His Escalade waited at the curb engine running heater, already warming the interior. The driver stood ready, door open. Across the street, the rival SUV from earlier idled again, bold watching. Vincent met the driver's eyes through the windshield, expression unreadable. The rival revved the engine once, a deliberate provocation, then pulled away slowly. Message clear, we're not done. Vincent ignored it. His focus was absolute. He helped the girls into the back seat first booster seats already installed, a detail his assistant had handled on his terse phone instructions minutes ago. Harper and Riley climbed in with wide-eyed wonder, touching the soft leather, peering at the tinted windows as though entering another world. Kayla hesitated at the door, staring into the luxurious interior. Heated seats glowed faintly, soft lighting, illuminated burled wood accents, a faint scent of new car and subtle cologne. The disparity crashed over her anew. Her life of public restrooms and concrete floors against this cocoon of wealth. Shock numbed her limbs. Dizziness threatened again. She swayed slightly. Vincent caught her elbow gently. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You're safe." His touch, warm, steady, sent an electric jolt through her. Confusion, fear, and something warmer she dared not name warred inside. Who was this man who commanded luxury vehicles and silenced threats with a look, yet knelt on dirty floors for strangers? She climbed in, body folding into the seat as though afraid to take up space. Vincent followed, closing the door with a solid, reassuring thunk. The world outside muted instantly, wind gone, cold banished. 4 Seasons, he told the driver. Corner suite overlooking the public garden. Kayla's breath caught. The 4 Seasons. She had walked past it countless times, seen its elegant entrance, imagined the warmth inside while huddling in doorways. Now she was going there. With her daughters. The unfairness of the shift from absolute destitution to this tore at her violently. Tears welled again, silent down thin cheeks. The drive through Boston's streets was short but surreal. Harper and Riley pressed faces to the windows, pointing at lights and buildings with delighted whispers. Kayla sat rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring at nothing. The psychological shock deepened. Someone who had been invisible reduced to begging, with a cardboard sign now riding in heated luxury, beside a man whose very presence commanded the city. Vincent watched her profile love burning hotter with every passing block. The passionate intensity of it frightened him. He had loved once Elena fiercely, completely, and lost everything. Now this woman, this stranger whose suffering mirrored his own buried pain, had awakened something he thought dead. Inner torment escalated, gnawing remorse for the dangers his world might bring. Her violent conflict between the need to protect and the knowledge that attachment could destroy them both. The hotel entrance loomed elegant, understated doormen in long coats. Vincent exited first, helping the girls down, then Kayla. She stood unsteadily on the sidewalk, clutching their hands. The doorman greeted Vincent by name recognition of a frequent high-end guest. Inside, the lobby stretched vast and warm marble floors, crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers on polished tables. Soft piano music drifted from somewhere unseen. Kayla froze in the doorway. The opulence overwhelmed her senses. Warmth after endless cold, light after fluorescent glare, space after cramped corners. Dizziness swept in strongly. The floor seemed to tilt. She gripped the girls tighter, afraid she might fall. Vincent noticed immediately. He murmured something to the concierge, who nodded discreetly. Within minutes, they were escorted to a private elevator, then to a corner suite on a high floor. The door opened onto wonder. 2 bedrooms branched off a spacious living area, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-dusted public garden. Plush cream carpets, velvet sofas, a marble fireplace already lit. A full kitchen gleamed stainless steel granite counters, a bowl of fresh fruit that smelled like summer. The bathrooms held deep soaking tubs, thick towels, robes in multiple sizes. Harper and Riley stood frozen in the entryway, mouths open. Then Riley ran forward, new boots sinking into carpet, touching everything with reverent fingers, the velvet couch, heavy curtains, the fruit bowl. "Mama, look, there's a big bathtub." Like in movies, Kayla remained just inside the door, unable to move. The plastic bag slipped from her wrist to the floor. Tears streamed freely now. She sank onto the nearest chair, body folding forward, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. 5 months of hypervigilance, of fear and cold and hunger came crashing down. The unfairness of finally reaching safety of her daughters, touching luxury while she still wore patched clothes, was too much. Vincent knelt before her again, careful not to crowd. "This is yours," he said softly. "For as long as you need. No conditions." Kayla looked up through tears, voice fracturing. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? What do you want from us?" The question asked 1,000 times in his business dealings. Always with hidden agendas, struck differently now. Standing in this suite he had booked without hesitation, watching a mother see safety for her children. Vincent realized he had no angle, no strategy, only choice. "You reminded me what all this is actually for," he said quietly, gesturing to the room, to the city beyond the windows. "I'd forgotten. Or maybe I never knew." Kayla stared at him, disorientation deepening. The man who could command such luxury, who rivals watched from shadows, was kneeling before her, voice thick with emotion she could not name. Harper tugged at Vincent's sleeve. "Mr. "Vincent, can we have the apples?" He smiled the first genuine smile in years and handed her the bowl. The girls settled at the coffee table with fruit and coloring books content in a way Kayla had not seen in months. "You need rest," Vincent told her gently. "Order room service. Take a bath. Sleep in a real bed. I'll return tomorrow. We'll plan next steps then." "Next steps," Kayla whispered, fear and hope mingling. "Housing, work, school for the girls, healthcare, stability." He listed them like items on a balance sheet, because that was how his mind worked. "None of this has to be temporary." Kayla opened her mouth to protest, to explain why this couldn't be real, why she was nobody but exhaustion won. She sank back against the cushion's body, finally allowing itself to relax into safety. "Thank you," she whispered the words, carrying months of suffering. Vincent nodded, throat too tight for speech. As he left, Harper's delighted laughter echoed behind him, pure, unafraid. Outside the hotel, the rival SUV circled the block, once slow and deliberate, before disappearing into traffic. Vincent's bodyguard noted the plates. War was coming. But inside the suite, in the quiet warmth Vincent had provided, Kayla Thompson finally let herself believe, not fully, not yet, but enough to close her eyes without fear. And Vincent Moretti, walking into the cold night with love burning fierce and new in his chest, knew he would face whatever came next to keep them safe. The immediate help had begun, but the real cost and the real redemption lay ahead. 3 weeks after that freezing February morning in the station, Kayla Thompson and her twins moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. It was not the penthouse luxury Vincent Moretti called home, but to Kayla, it felt like a palace. Clean hardwood floors, builder-grade carpet in the bedroom's laminate counters that gleamed under new light fixtures, windows that let in sunlight without letting in wind. A small playground sat out back swings, creaking gently in the spring breeze that had finally begun to soften Chicago's edges. The rent was covered quietly through one of Vincent's legitimate real estate holdings, subsidized at first with a clear path to independence. Vincent helped them move in himself. He carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs, sleeves rolled on a crisp white shirt that cost more than Kayla's old monthly grocery budget. He assembled IKEA furniture with surprising patience, laughing when Harper insisted on supervising by placing Bella the bear on every flat surface and declaring it decorated. Riley arranged her new stuffed animals with solemn seriousness, tongue poking out in concentration. Kayla watched from the kitchen doorway, arms wrapped around herself, still wearing the same worn coat because buying something new for herself felt impossible. The sight of Vincent, powerful, feared Vincent Moretti on his knees, tightening screws while her daughters giggled around him, created a violent ache in her chest. Shock still came in waves. Someone who had slept on subway grates, who had rationed a single granola bar between 3 mouths, now standing in her own kitchen with a refrigerator that hummed reliably, and a pantry Vincent had quietly stocked, with peanut butter, apples, cereal, and milk. The disparity tore at her daily. She would wake in the night sometimes, heart pounding, convinced it was a dream, only to feel the soft mattress beneath her, hear the twins breathing evenly in the next room, and dissolve into silent tears of disbelief and gratitude. Vincent visited often, not as a benefactor checking on an investment, but as someone who simply wanted to be there. He brought deep dish pizza from Lou Malnati's on Fridays, taught the girls how to throw a baseball in the park across the street, attended their first school open house at the highly rated public elementary where he had pulled strings for enrollment. He fixed the dripping kitchen faucet one evening without being asked. Sleeves rolled again, tools spread on her counter like it was the most natural thing in the world. With each visit, the closeness grew. Late evenings became their quiet time after the twins were asleep. Kayla would make coffee, real coffee from beans Vincent brought, and they would sit on the modest couch talking in low voices. She told him about her husband, the cancer that drained their savings, the foreclosure notice that came the week after the funeral, about the shelters that ran out of beds the nights she walked the girls in circles to keep them warm, the humiliation of the cardboard sign. Vincent listened without interrupting, face shadowed. Each story carved deeper into him. The passionate love that had ignited that first day now burned steady and fierce, intertwined with gnawing remorse for the indifference he had once worn like armor. Violent inner conflict raged on quieter nights. The knowledge that his world was circling closer, rival sightings, more frequent, bold drive-bys near the apartment building, tense standoffs in neutral territory where his men stared down, challengers without a word spoken. He had exposed vulnerability by helping Kayla, and the wolves smelled blood. One April evening, after the girls performed in a school play, Harper as a tree, Riley as a butterfly, Vincent lingered longer than usual. The twins had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted and happy, still in costume wings. Kayla covered them gently with a blanket, then joined Vincent at the kitchen table. "I started the nursing assistant program last week," she said, quietly, voice soft with wonder. "Classes 3 evenings. The child care center at the community college takes the girls. It's It's real. Vincent nodded, throat tight. You're going to be incredible at it. She looked at him then, really looked. The man who could silence a room with a glance, who rivals watched from shadows, who lived in a world of wealth she could barely imagine. Yet here he was in her small kitchen with mismatched chairs looking at her like she was the extraordinary one. Why do you keep coming back? She asked, voice trembling slightly. You don't have to. You've already done more than anyone ever. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The contact was warm, deliberate. Because I want to, he said simply. Because being here, with you, with them, it's the only place that feels right anymore. Kayla's breath caught. The touch sent fire through her veins. Confusion, fear, and longing collided violently. She had not allowed herself to feel anything beyond survival in years. Now, this protected scene, cared for by a man whose very presence made the world shift. Psychological shock rippled through her, dizziness at the edges of vision, numbness in her fingers, except where his skin touched hers. Vincent felt it too. The love in his chest surged, passionate and consuming. Inner torment escalated, remorse for the danger he might bring her, conflict between the life he could not yet leave and the future he suddenly craved. He leaned closer, eyes searching hers. I know this is fast, he said quietly. I know you have every reason to be careful. But Kyla, from the moment I saw you in that station, something in me changed. I don't want to just help you. I want to be part of this. Part of your life, if you'll let me. Tears filled her eyes. The unfairness of it, of finally being offered not just safety but love, tore at her heart with violent intensity. She had been invisible, powerless, reduced to begging while the city glittered around her. Now this man, this powerful, complicated man, was looking at her like she was everything. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I'm still the woman from the station. Patched coat and cardboard sign. Vincent stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair the same way he had that first day. You're the strongest person I've ever met, he said fiercely. And I don't care where you came from. I care where we're going. He cupped her face gently, thumb brushing away a tear. The closeness was electric. Kayla's heart pounded so hard she feared it might break. When he leaned in slow enough for her to pull away, she didn't. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, reverent, then deeper, hungrier. Months of unspoken longing poured out her gratitude and fear, his remorse and fierce protectiveness. It was passionate, intense, a collision of two worlds that should never have met. Outside in the quiet Lincoln Park street, a dark sedan slowed as it passed the building. The driver noted the familiar Escalade, parked legally but prominently. Word would travel fast. Inside, Kayla pulled back slightly, breathless forehead resting against his. I'm scared, she admitted in a whisper. Me too, Vincent said honestly. The inner conflict tore wider, love for her warring with the shadows closing in. But I'm more scared of walking away. They sat like that for a long time, hands entwined, the twins sleeping peacefully nearby. The apartment settled around them with gentle creaks, and the hum of the refrigerator sounds of home. Rebuilding had begun brick by brick. Kayla enrolled in classes, the girls thrived in school. Vincent became a quiet fixture in their lives. But the closeness grew in stolen moments, lingering touches, shared glances, evenings that stretched later. And with each step forward, the danger circled closer. Rivals watched. Messages were sent through subtle intimidation, cars idling too long, men appearing unexpectedly near the playground. Vincent handled each confrontation with cold precision, stares and postures speaking volumes without a hand raised. But the love between Vincent and Kayla deepened. Regardless, fierce and growing a light strong enough to challenge even the darkest shadows. The rebuilding of lives had become something more, a rebuilding of hearts fragile and fierce and new. The summer of 2025 brought warmth to Chicago that Kayla Thompson had almost forgotten existed. Sunlight streamed through the apartment windows in Lincoln Park, painting golden patterns on the hardwood floors where Harper and Riley played with building blocks Vincent had brought home one evening. Kayla stood at the kitchen counter, cutting apples for their snack. Her nursing assistant scrubs neatly folded on the chair, ready for her shift later that day. She had completed the program with honors, landed a steady position at a nearby clinic, and for the first time in years her paycheck was her own. Yet beneath the surface, calm tension coiled tighter with each passing week. Vincent Moretti had become woven into the fabric of their lives. He arrived most evenings with takeout from local favorites or groceries he insisted were just extras from his own kitchen. He read bedtime stories to the twins in funny voices that made them giggle uncontrollably. He held Kayla's hand during quiet moments on the couch, kisses growing deeper, more urgent as the love between them burned brighter and fiercer. But Vincent carried a secret that gnawed at him like acid. He had learned the truth weeks after moving them into the apartment. A routine background check habit from his world revealed Kayla's late husband had been an undercover federal agent killed 6 years earlier during an operation targeting one of Vincent's early construction rackets. The agent had died in the crossfire of a deal gone wrong, a deal Vincent himself had authorized. Not by his hand, but by his command. The knowledge had struck him like a physical blow. Gnawing remorse became consuming torment. Every smile from Kayla, every trusting touch, every delighted laugh from the twins carved deeper into his soul. Violent inner conflict raged nightly, the desperate need to confess, warring with terror that the truth would destroy the fragile happiness he had found. He loved her with a passion that bordered on pain, intense, overwhelming, the kind of love that remade a man from the inside out. Losing her now would finish what Elena's death had started. He waited too long. One August evening, after a perfect day picnic in the park ice cream cones, the girls falling asleep early from exhaustion, Vincent sat with Kayla on the small balcony overlooking the playground. City lights twinkled below the distant hum of traffic, a lullaby. Her head rested on his shoulder, fingers entwined with his. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, voice rough. Kayla lifted her head, sensing the shift. "What is it?" Vincent's heart tore with violent force. He turned to face her, taking both her hands. "Your husband. How he died." She stilled, confusion flickering. "The cancer." "No." The word escaped like a wound. Before that, his work. He was undercover. FBI. Kayla's face paled. She pulled her hands away slowly as though burned. "How do you know that?" Vincent's throat closed. Remorse flooded him, hot and suffocating. "Because the operation he disrupted. It was mine. 6 years ago. One of my deals. He died because of it." The balcony spun for Kayla. Shock crashed over her in numbing waves, dizziness so severe she gripped the railing to stay upright. The man she had come to love, who had saved her from the streets, who tucked her daughters in at night, connected to the worst loss of her life. Horror, betrayal, grief resurrected, raw and bleeding. Tears spilled instantly. "You." Her voice broke. "You knew." "Not at first," Vincent said, voice fracturing. "I found out after. I swear, Kayla, if I'd known then." She stood abruptly, backing away until the sliding door pressed against her spine. "Get out. Kayla, please, get out." The whisper was fierce, broken. The twins slept inside. She would not wake them to this nightmare. Vincent rose slowly, hands open, pleading. The passionate love in his chest roared in agony. "I hate myself for it. Every day. It's why I couldn't walk past you in that station. Some part of me knew I owed you. Everything." She slid down the door, sinking to the balcony floor, sobs silent but shaking her entire frame. The unfairness tore at her, violently rescued from poverty's depths, only to discover the man she loved carried responsibility for the poverty's beginning. Confusion, pain, rage collided until she felt she might shatter. Vincent knelt at a distance, tears tracking his own cheeks. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know I love you. More than anything, and I'll spend the rest of my life making this right if you'll let me." He left that night, the door closing softly behind him. Weeks passed in agonizing separation. Kayla moved through days like a ghost work, caring for the girls' nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The twins asked for Mr. Vincent, with increasing sadness. She saw him sometimes from a distance, watching the playground, ensuring their safety as rivals grew bolder. A dark car idling too long across the street one day led to a tense standoff. Vincent handled with cold authority, rivals backing down without a word. He protected them still, even from the shadows. The absence carved deeper than any cold night on the streets ever had. One September evening, rain pattering against the windows, Kayla found Vincent on the building, steps soaked through waiting. He looked thinner, eyes haunted. "I can't do this without you," he said, simply, voice raw. "Any of it." Kayla stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. The love she had tried to bury surged back, fierce and painful. She saw his torment, the remorse that had aged him, the love that had not dimmed. Forgiveness was not simple. It was not clean. But looking at him, remembering the man who had knelt on dirty tile for a destitute stranger who had given her daughters warmth and laughter, she felt the violent tear in her heart begin to heal. She stepped aside. "Come in. You're dripping on the steps." Vincent entered slowly, afraid to hope. The twins ran to him immediately, hugging his wet legs. He knelt, holding them tightly, tears falling unchecked. Later, after they slept, Kayla and Vincent sat at the kitchen table. Rain drummed steadily. "I hate what happened," she said quietly, voice steady despite fresh tears. "I'll always hate it. But I see how it's destroying you too. And she reached for his hand. "I love you anyway." Vincent's sob escaped like a dam breaking. He pressed her hand to his lips, shaking. "I'm so sorry." "I know," she whispered. "I forgive you. Not because it's easy, because hating you would hurt the girls. And because I can't stop loving you." They held each other through the night, tears mingling the confession finally spoken. Forgiveness came, not in a moment, but in the quiet choice to stay. Outside, rivals continued to circle cars, slowing near the building, bold stares in neutral territory. Vincent met each challenge with increasing resolve, protecting the family he now refused to lose. But inside the apartment, in the condensed stillness after storm, Kayla and Vincent began to heal. The love between them, forged in loss, tested by truth, emerged stronger, more passionate, a fierce flame that no shadow could fully extinguish. Rebuilding had taken on new meaning, not just lives, but hearts shattered and remade. October 2025 arrived with a chill that seeped through Chicago's streets like a warning. Vincent Moretti and Kayla Thompson had found a fragile rhythm in the months since forgiveness. Nights spent wrapped in each other, mornings filled with the twins' laughter, evenings planning a future that felt almost possible. Kayla's job at the clinic brought steady purpose. The girls thrived in second grade, their drawings of family now including a tall figure with dark hair. Vincent, though still navigating the shadows of his world, had begun quietly shifting assets, preparing for a day when he could leave it all behind. But the rivals had waited long enough. They struck on a crisp Saturday afternoon. Kayla had taken Harper and Riley to the Lincoln Park playground, a short walk from the apartment, a place they went often for swings and fresh air. Vincent was tied up in a meeting across town, negotiating territory lines that had grown increasingly tense. Bold confrontations had escalated in recent weeks, cars blocking his escalade at intersections, rivals appearing unexpectedly near the clinic where Kayla worked, silent standoffs in coffee shops where stares lasted too long before backing down. He should have seen it coming. The black van pulled up without warning, blocking the playground entrance. Two men emerged, faces Vincent's crew would recognize instantly as enforcers from the West Loop faction. Mothers nearby gathered children and hurried away, sensing danger without understanding it. Kayla froze on the bench, watching as the men approached the swings where Harper and Riley laughed together. Her heart stopped. Instinct screamed run, but the men moved too fast. One scooped Riley up mid-swing. The other grabbed Harper's hand, voice calm but firm. "Time to go with Uncle Tony, kids. Your mom's waiting in the car." Kayla bolted forward, voice rising in panic. "Let them go. They're my daughters." The nearer man turned, expression cold. "Message from Moretti. He knows what it's about." They bundled the screaming twins into the van and sped away before Kayla could reach them. She collapsed on the gravel path, sobs tearing from her throat, body shaking with horror and powerlessness. The unfairness crushed her, the brief taste of safety ripped away in seconds, her daughters taken because of a world she barely understood. Dizziness overwhelmed her. The playground spun colors, blurring as numbness spread through her limbs. She fumbled for her phone, dialing Vincent with trembling fingers. Vincent was in a warehouse on the south side, mid-negotiation, when the call came. Kayla's broken voice. "They took the girls, shattered him." The room fell silent. His counterparts watched as color drained from his face. He ended the call and stood slowly, voice deadly calm. "We're done here." The rival across the table smirked. "Heard you got soft, Moretti?" "Family man now." Vincent's response was ice. He left without another word, men falling in behind him. The next 48 hours became a nightmare. Rivals demanded territory concessions, prime construction rackets Vincent had held for years. Refuse and the girls would suffer. Vincent unleashed everything: contacts in law enforcement, quietly fed information, crews mobilized across the city, every favor called in. But the kidnappers stayed one step ahead, moving locations, taunting with brief calls where the twins' frightened whimpers echoed in the background. Kayla barely functioned. She paced the apartment, thin-framed, trembling, refusing food or sleep. Memories of past poverty flooded back, nights on cold concrete, feeling safer than this waiting. The psychological shock was violent horror that her daughters might endure, fear she knew too well, anxiety tearing at her heart until pain radiated through her chest. Vincent held her when he could, his own torment mirroring hers, gnawing remorse for bringing danger to their door. Violent conflict between the ruthless boss he had been and the man desperate to save his family. He led the rescue himself. Intelligence pinpointed the girls to an abandoned warehouse along the Chicago River, snow beginning to fall in heavy flakes. Vincent arrived with a small, trusted team moving silently through the shadows. Rivals guarded the perimeter, tense, armed, waiting. The confrontation was bold and unexpected. Vincent stepping into the open under floodlights, hands visible, voice carrying across the empty lot. "Send the girls out. This ends now." The rival boss emerged smug. "Big gesture, Moretti." "But you come alone." Vincent's men revealed themselves from surrounding positions. Silent encirclement. Standoff stretched, snow, swirling breaths visible in the cold. No shots fired, just the weight of stares and unspoken threats. Inside, Harper and Riley huddled in a corner room, guarded but unharmed. Their small faces were pale, eyes wide with fear, but they clung to each other with the same protectiveness Kayla had shown that first day in the station. Kayla, against every plea to stay safe, had followed at a distance. She arrived as negotiations stalled, heart pounding, clutching the backup pistol Vincent kept in the apartment glove box. She had never fired a gun, but maternal desperation overrode everything. The rival boss raised his voice, mocking. "All this for a woman and 2 brats. You're finished, Moretti." Vincent stepped forward, distracting. In that moment, Kayla slipped through a side entrance one of Vincent's men had cleared. She moved on pure instinct, quiet shaking, finding the room where her daughters waited. The guard turned at her approach. Time slowed. Kayla raised the pistol with both hands, voice steady despite terror. "Let them go." The man lunged. Kayla fired once, the sound deafening in the confined space. The guard fell stunned but alive. Vincent's team stormed in simultaneously. Chaos erupted outside, rivals scattering as Vincent's men closed the net. Snow-muffled shouts, tires spinning on ice as vehicles fled. Vincent reached the room first, finding Kayla on her knees, pistol dropped, cradling Harper and Riley as they sobbed into her neck. Blood speckled the floor, not theirs, not seriously anyone's, but the shock of what she had done crashed over her. Her body shook violently, dizziness returning in waves. She had saved them, but the act tore at her soul. Vincent gathered all 3 into his arms, holding them as though they might vanish. The passionate love in his chest roared with gratitude and horror. His family safe because of her courage, endangered because of his past. Remorse consumed him anew. They escaped into the night snow, falling thicker, covering tracks. Rivals retreated territory, demands forgotten in the face of Vincent's unleashed fury. Back home, the apartment felt sacred and fragile. The twins fell asleep, exhausted between them on the couch. Kayla sat numb, staring at her hands. Vincent knelt before her, tears in his eyes. "You saved us," he whispered. "I had to," she answered, voice breaking. "No one takes my family again." The event bound them in shared trauma, blood on snow, fear turned to survival. The love between them intensified, fierce and unbreakable. Kayla, once destitute and powerless, had become the strongest force Vincent had ever known. But the cost clarified everything. His world could not touch them again. In the quiet aftermath, snow muffling the city outside, Vincent made his decision. The empire would end, not with war but with exit. The danger had revealed the truth: love was worth more than power, and he would burn everything to keep it safe. The snow from that October night lingered on the ground for weeks, a white reminder of how close Vincent Moretti had come to losing everything he now held most dear. The kidnapping had shattered the last illusion that he could protect Kayla and the twins while remaining half in his old world. Every time Harper or Riley woke from a nightmare crying out in the dark, Vincent felt the tear in his heart widen, gnawing remorse for the danger his past had brought. Violent conflict between the man he had been and the father he wanted to become. He made the decision in the quiet hours before dawn, holding Kayla as she slept fitfully against his chest. He would end it. Not with war, not with retaliation, but with complete surrender of the empire that had defined him for decades. Using every legitimate contact, every carefully cultivated relationship in law enforcement and government, Vincent orchestrated his exit. He turned over evidence against remaining rivals' names, routes, accounts in exchange for full immunity and federal protection for himself and his new family. Clean money was redirected into legitimate investments. The Moretti name, once whispered in fear, began to appear on charity boards and hospital wings. By spring of the following year, the Moretti Family Foundation launched quietly but powerfully emergency housing, medical debt relief, job training, and childcare support for single parents across Illinois. Kayla became co-director, her lived experience guiding every decision. She stood beside Vincent at the first press conference, voice steady as she spoke of surviving homelessness, of the systems that failed families, of the difference one act of compassion could make. Vincent watched her with awe that never diminished. The passionate love that had ignited in a cold train station now burned steady and explosive, a fire that consumed old regrets and lit new paths. He loved her fiercely without reservation, seeing in her strength the redemption he had never believed possible. One warm June evening, as the sun dipped low over Lake Michigan, Vincent led Kayla, Harper, and Riley to a secluded beach north of the city. The girls ran ahead, chasing waves in bare feet, laughter echoing over the water. Kayla walked beside him, hand in his still, sometimes marveling at the simple luxury of sand between her toes after years of concrete and cold. Vincent stopped near a driftwood log, heart pounding harder than any confrontation he had ever faced. He knelt not on dirty tile this time, but on soft sand, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside rested his mother's restored vintage ring diamonds catching the sunset. "Kayla Thompson," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You saved me long before I ever saved you. You showed me that goodness survives the worst this world can throw at it. That love doesn't see wealth or poverty, skin color, or past mistakes, only hearts. I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the forgiveness you gave me, of the family you've let me join." Tears streamed down Kayla's face. The journey from destitute mother begging in a station to this moment, loved beyond reason by a man who had remade his life for her still, brought waves of disorientation, of grateful shock that left her breathless. She nodded, unable to speak, pulling him up into an embrace that turned into a kiss, deep and explosive, years of pain and joy colliding in the salt-tinged air. That night, after the girls slept in a nearby lakeside cottage, Vincent had rented Kayla, and Vincent finally gave themselves fully to the love that had been building since that first day. It was passionate, intense, overwhelming, two survivors, claiming joy with abandoned bodies, and hearts entwined under starlit windows, whispers of forever mingling with waves against the shore. They married quietly the following autumn with only close friends, the twins as flower girls in simple dresses and the lake as witness. No extravagance, just vows spoken with tears and laughter, promises rooted in hard-won truth. Years later, the Moretti family walked through Millennium Park on ordinary days, Vincent pushing a stroller with their new baby Kayla, holding the twins' hands as they skipped ahead, Harper and Riley now calling him Daddy Vincent without hesitation. They were a loud, loving, beautifully chaotic American family, Italian-American roots, African-American heritage from Kayla's side, love that transcended every divide society tried to draw. Vincent often reflected on the profound knowledge that real power lay not in fear but in lifting others. The lesson that desperation did not corrupt goodness, but could reveal its deepest strength. The education that wealth meant nothing without compassion, and poverty could never diminish a heart capable of extraordinary love. Knowledge that forgiveness was the bravest act a person could choose. Lesson after lesson written in the life they built together, education in humanity that no university could teach. From that first moment in the station, Vincent had known deep, life-altering knowledge that love was the only currency that truly multiplied. The lesson that one act of trust could rewrite destinies. The education that no past was irredeemable when met with grace. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths like this video, and share it with someone who needs hope today. You'll find many more engaging stories released every day, tales of resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of kindness. How did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of moments in real life where love overcame impossible odds? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one, and love hearing the emotions from deep within your body. Hearts, wishing you all good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. See you in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.